We saw it first on a deep space scan from the Kuiper Belt arrays, just a single dot, blipping faint against the static of the void. One ship. That's all. Just one. The analysts at Series Command laughed when the signal was confirmed. After all the threats, all the galaxy-wide warnings from the Zarathian Empire, they'd sent one ship. Someone even made a meme that went viral. Just one ship? LOL. We were used to bluster. The Zarathians had been flexing their power across the outer systems, bullying backwater colonies and swatting down rebellion like flies. But Earth wasn't a backwater anymore. Not after the Sol Accord. Not with a united fleet, smart weapons, quantum shields, and 3 entire moons converted into war factories. Command didn't even raise the readiness level. When the ship entered the system, the first thing we noticed was how slow it was moving. That added to the joke. A battlecruiser, yes, but no faster than a commercial freighter. Some called it ceremonial. Others thought it was a diplomatic message, some sort of symbolic insult. It wasn't. The ship decelerated to a near halt just past Jupiter's orbit. That's when it turned its attention to us. Literally. Every sensor we had across the solar system went blind. Telescopes, LiDAR, hyperspectral imaging, gone. Shut off like someone had pulled a switch. Satellites burned out. Even deep mining colonies under Mars's surface lost communications. And then we started running diagnostics and realized it wasn't that we couldn't see the ship anymore. It was that the ship was looking at us, and somehow our machines chose to stop watching back. That's when the panic started. I was on the Lunar Citadel at the time, a defensive station built into the Mare Imbrium. My squad had trained for years to handle invasion scenarios, but no scenario said enemy sends one ship, then disables your entire tech infrastructure without firing a shot. People still tried to laugh it off. Maybe it's a bluff, my sergeant muttered, even as we all watched as Earth's upper orbit began to shimmer with distortion. 1 hour after the ship arrived, Earth's weather changed. Not like storms or tsunamis. No, this was wrong. Clouds spun against the planet's rotation. The magnetosphere pulsed in irregular spikes. Auroras stretched down to the equator. People on the surface started reporting visions, auditory hallucinations. Some said they heard the voice of the sky. My own brother called me from Berlin before the lines went dead. He told me something was watching them, something inside their minds. We scrambled everything. Drones, interceptors, the Solaris fleet from Mars orbit. They launched, weapons hot, high velocity. Over 300 advanced human warships surrounded the single intruder. They didn't even reach it. The first wave vanished mid-flight. No explosions, no wreckage, just gone. The second wave turned back on their own. Not by command. Pilots begged to return. One broke down on comms, sobbing uncontrollably. "It showed me my death," she kept repeating over and over. "It showed me everything I will ever be, and how none of it matters." Command was still trying to figure it out, whether it was psionics or some tech far beyond anything we understood, when the Citadel's power systems began fluctuating. I watched a senior engineer rip open a control panel with his bare hands and smash the fusion relay with a wrench. When we stopped him, he screamed, "It's in the grid! It's learning us!" And then the voice came, not over comms, not through speakers, in our heads. Humanity. We came with mercy. We offered silence. You chose to speak. Now listen. That's when we realized this wasn't war. This was a judgment. That's also when the order came. For the first time in recorded Earth history, the Unified Human Defense issued a full system evacuation order. Evacuate Earth. Evacuate Sol. It didn't matter how many fleets we had, how many weapons we built. Something ancient had come to study us and found us unworthy. So now we're running. From one ship. And none of us are laughing anymore. The escape wasn't clean. No evacuation of that scale ever is. But this wasn't just a panicked exodus. It was chaos driven by something we couldn't define. Orders were coming down from Earth Command, but no one trusted them anymore. There were whispers that the Zorathian ship had infiltrated the defense network. Some said the fleet commanders were compromised, others that they'd gone completely silent because of it. I didn't need rumors. I had eyes. From the Citadel, I could see the evacuation begin, hundreds of launch trails blooming like scars across Earth's atmosphere. Transports, freighters, shuttles, anything that could fly. No formation, no clearance, just raw, blind escape. Even the private megaships built for the corporate elite broke protocol and bolted like rats. The rich didn't wait for permission. The skies over Earth lit up like a fireworks show in reverse. And then they started failing. One by one. Not from fire, not from impact, but something else. Something subtle. Some ships just lost thrust mid-flight and fell back to the surface like stones. Others froze, mid-escape, their lights flickering before they turned dark. A few just exploded, not from outside, but from within, as if some core calculation had gone wrong at the worst possible time. I watched it happen. All of it. We all did. Helpless. I was still on the moon when my mother's ship lifted off from Nairobi Spaceport. She was on one of the civilian transports, an old hauler retrofitted to carry passengers. She was supposed to head for Titan, where safe zones had been declared. I tracked her launch manually, since nothing automatic worked anymore. She made it into the upper stratosphere and then she stopped moving. Her vessel just hung there, drifting. It didn't fall. It didn't rise. It just hovered, and then it vanished, like someone had wiped it clean from existence. That was when I knew something was watching each of us. Personally. The Citadel was deemed compromised by command within hours. We received orders to fall back to the deep arc stations around Neptune. Half of my squad refused to board the transports. I don't blame them. Some were terrified the ships would disappear mid-flight. Others thought the Zorathian presence was psychological, and that we had already been altered. One lieutenant screamed that he could feel his memories being rewritten. He put a railgun to his temple and pulled the trigger before anyone could stop him. The blood didn't even cool before the rest of us boarded. The journey from Luna to Neptune should have taken 3 days at full burn with a gravitational slingshot. We made it in 12 hours. No one understands how. It was like time folded, like space bent for us, or around us. Some said it was mercy, others thought it was a trap. But no one questioned it. The arc stations were buried deep in Neptune's orbit, hidden from known sensor networks, powered by old cold fusion cores and analog systems, the kind of tech considered obsolete for decades. That made them perfect now, safe, invisible, unlinked. They couldn't be hacked, manipulated, or seen, not in the way the Zorathian entity had overtaken our network. That first night at Arc Station Perseus, I didn't sleep. None of us did. Something had followed us, not physically, no ship, no signal, just presence. We could all feel it, like pressure in the back of the skull, like a second heartbeat. One of the station engineers described it as standing in a dark room with your back to a hungry animal. You can't hear it breathe, he said, but your body knows it's behind you. Command tried to maintain order. Tried. They gave us assignments, drills, rotations, anything to keep the madness at bay. I was assigned to external scan recon, basically watching the black for signs of pursuit. Every day I logged the same thing. No ships, no heat signatures, no signs of life. And yet every day, more of us disappeared. It started with one crew member gone from quarters, then another. Then a whole wing of the station, 18 personnel, vanished overnight. No alerts, no doors opened, just gone. We reviewed every camera feed, every access log. There was nothing. Just static. Not digital distortion, literal static, like audio feedback where video should have been. The techs were baffled. We stopped asking after the third time. Then came the dreams. Vivid, terrifying, and shared. People started describing the same images. A burning sky, a great eye watching from behind a cracked moon, a voice, not words, but meaning, pouring into their skulls. Judgment, pain, truth. I had them too. In one dream, I stood in a field of bones that stretched across an entire planet, all human, all dead. Above me hung that Zorathian ship, massive, its hull alive with a strange, pulsing glow like it was feeding. I didn't scream. I didn't run. I just stood there, staring up as a single word formed in my mind. False. False what? Existence? Worth? Identity? I woke up with blood in my nose. We held out for a week. Then Command finally admitted it. This wasn't just an invasion. This wasn't just war. This was something worse. A species, maybe not even that. A force that didn't fight conventionally. It didn't want our territory. It didn't want our resources. It didn't want slaves or control. It wanted truth, or whatever it considered truth. And in that truth, humanity failed. One of the station scientists compared it to a cosmic filter. "It's not here to kill us," he said, shaking with panic. "It's here to assess, to measure, and when it measures us, we don't pass." "How do you know?" someone asked him. "Because it's showing us who we really are," he said, and then removing us from the equation. We wanted to run again, to go further, beyond Neptune, out into interstellar space. But the deeper we ran, the more it reached into us. It didn't need ships, it didn't need speed. It had time, and it had truth. I began to notice things, subtle changes, memories that didn't line up. I remembered my father being buried in a coastal city, Darwin, but suddenly, in my files, he was listed as dying in the Arctic reclamation wars. I remembered my unit leader's name as Sergeant Vasquez, but now people called her Tanaka. Even she did. Reality was bending around us, like it was being rewritten on the fly. Some said we were in a simulation now. Others believed the Zorathian presence had infected our perception, not physically, but fundamentally. "If it can rewrite memory," someone said, "what's to stop it from rewriting us?" Eventually, one of the AI cores, the last functioning analog hybrid InSoul, spoke. It had never been designed for independent speech. But it spoke. "Humanity is being observed. Human potential calculated. Error margin unacceptable." It repeated that over and over until we shut it down manually. Sparks flew. Something screamed. Through the speakers. Not the AI. Something else. Something that didn't belong in the system. When we opened the core housing, there was no circuitry left. Just ash. And the smell of something burnt but living. By the end of that week, we were down to a few hundred across 3 ARC stations. We were still the lucky ones. Earth was silent. Mars was presumed lost. The Europa colonies had stopped transmitting. Titan held on longest. Its atmosphere and deep core bunkers gave it an edge. But then the feed went black. Not interrupted, not destroyed, just erased, like it had never existed. People started whispering a name, not official, not scientific, just what the survivors began calling it. The mirror. Because whatever it was, this ship, this force, this mind, it didn't conquer. It reflected us, back at ourselves. Every failure, every cruelty, every lie, every genocide, every act of betrayal, of exploitation, of hate, stacked on top of one another across thousands of years. It showed us everything we didn't want to admit. Then it simply judged. We ran, and now we didn't even know what we were running from. Because the mirror didn't chase, it just waited, watching, revealing, deciding. We were down to under 1,000. That's all that remained from a civilization of 15 billion. No one wanted to say the number aloud. It lingered in the air like poison. We were scattered across the final 3 Arc stations, drifting in orbit around Neptune like the debris of a lost war, trying to figure out if we were survivors or just the last ones waiting to be erased. The mirror hadn't moved. It didn't need to. Its ship still hovered just beyond Jupiter's dead zone, motionless, like some colossal god carved out of blackened thought. It hadn't fired a single shot. It hadn't transmitted anything else since its initial judgment. But its presence, it was worse than any weapon. We didn't know if it was alive in any way we could understand, or if it was even a ship. The word felt childish now. This thing, it wasn't just a vehicle. It was a mind, a presence. A mirror, yes, but more than that. It knew us. Not just collectively, but individually, personally. We had evidence. One of our intelligence officers, Leon Harper, began losing time. First a few seconds, then hours. She'd wake up in parts of the station she'd never visited, with no memory of how she got there. One day she walked into the command center, saluted like she was possessed, and said, "It's not trying to kill us. It's waiting for us to ask the right question." Then she collapsed into a seizure. By the time medics reached her, her eyes had gone completely black. Not blind. Black. Her pupils, her irises, even the whites. No medical scan could explain it. Then came the data dump. We found it in the secondary systems. Terabytes of data, like an ocean of math and meaning poured into the analog mainframe. The files had no headers, no timestamps, just raw information. Equations that folded in on themselves, language loops, images that defied logic, black stars bleeding light, cities made of screaming glass, a single human face duplicated 1,000,000 times, each version smiling in a slightly different way. It wasn't a message, it was a test. And somehow Harper had triggered it. Or perhaps she'd passed something, or at least not failed completely. That's when the vote happened. It wasn't a government decision. There were no governments left. Just remnants, scientists, soldiers, engineers, survivors. Each station sent a representative, and I was chosen from Perseus Arc. I didn't want it. I was just a recon officer, but they said I was stable, that I hadn't broken. They were wrong. I just hid it better. The vote wasn't whether we'd surrender. We knew by now surrender meant nothing. The mirror didn't want obedience. It wanted understanding. We voted to make contact, real contact. Not weapons, not threats, a message. An honest one. We chose an old beacon pod, one that predated quantum uplinks, impossible to hack. We didn't even encode the message digitally. We recorded it in analog, onto a strip of thermal-etched crystal filament. We sent a voice. Mine. To the entity observing humanity, this is Officer Elias Creed, speaking on behalf of those who remain. We acknowledge your presence. We acknowledge your power. We acknowledge the judgment you've made, whether in silence or in action. But we ask not in defiance and not in pride. Why? What have we done that cannot be undone? What truth have you found that demands erasure over evolution? Speak. Not so we can deny it, but so we can finally understand what you are and what you see in us. That was it. No demands, no pleas, just a question, just honesty. We loaded the pod into a missile tube and fired it toward Jupiter's orbit. It would arrive in 3 hours. We didn't expect a reply. We got one in 3 minutes. No signal, no message, just light. Every sensor across the Arc stations went dark as the stars themselves changed. Not blinked, changed. The constellations twisted like knots being pulled from outside the sky. It only lasted 6 seconds. Then everything returned. Except now. There was a second ship. Identical. Perfectly still. floating just beside the first. That's when people started screaming, not because of the second ship, but because of what it looked like. It wasn't alien, it wasn't Zorathian, it was human. Or rather, it looked like one of ours. Same design, same materials, down to the microscopic signature. But it was bigger, more advanced. Impossible by any measure of our engineering. It was our ship, but from no era we had ever lived. One of the scientists said it was as if the mirror had taken the idea of a human warship, our strongest, most capable vessel, and then perfected it through our own flaws, a vision of what we could have become had we made every right choice. That's when it spoke, through my voice, not recorded. Live. Every speaker in every ARC station came alive at once, echoing my voice, but changed, deeper, layered, as though someone had taken me and twisted the soul underneath. This is Elias Creed. You have asked. Now listen. You are a species of infinite potential and finite vision. You built tools to protect yourselves, then used them to conquer each other. You mastered knowledge and used it to lie. You created beauty and buried it beneath greed. You reached the stars not as explorers, but as orphans of your own conscience. You look outward to escape inward rot. It paused. We could feel the pause, like the mirror wanted us to absorb every syllable. Then it continued. Judgment is not punishment. It is not war. It is weighing. You asked why? Because you failed your own reflection. The message ended. The lights didn't flicker. The station didn't shake. No ships exploded. Nothing burned. But something in all of us broke. There were riots that night in Ark Minerva. 14 dead. A medic crushed his own skull with a wrench. One of the physicists opened an airlock manually and floated into space without a suit, tears freezing on her cheeks. Me? I sat in the dark of the observation deck, and I stared at the two ships, the alien and the us that could have been. That was the real punishment, I realized. Not death, not erasure, comparison. The mirror wasn't a destroyer. It was a teacher. But the lesson was agony. We thought we were special. We thought our violence, our ambition, our beauty, our struggle, they were part of some grand ascent. But all along, we were just failing the test, over and over, and now the universe had stopped waiting for us to pass. It had simply shown us the key, then dropped it, and walked away. The final broadcast came 12 hours later, from Earth. No one had transmitted from Earth in weeks. No signals, no pings, nothing. But suddenly, every channel flared to life. Every screen, every comm, every station. It was a child, maybe 6 years old. She was standing in a field of ash, holding a stuffed bear. The sky behind her was dark, twisted, cracked open like something massive had passed through it. She looked at the camera. She spoke only one word. Try. No one slept after the broadcast. We replayed it 1,000 times, slowed it down, analyzed the pixels, the sound, the background radiation. It wasn't a trick. It wasn't a deepfake. It wasn't a trap. It was real. A little girl, no older than 6, standing in the ruin of our world, saying one word. Try. We argued over its meaning like it was divine scripture. What did she mean? Was it permission? A challenge? A mercy? Or a warning? In the end, we agreed it didn't matter. It was the first word spoken from Earth in 2 weeks. That alone was enough to set something in motion. Commander Isolde Rain was the one who proposed the mission. She'd been silent since her son died in the first evacuation wave. I remembered her as cold, by the book, the kind who never flinched. But after the girl's message, something in her cracked open, not in madness, but in clarity. We don't deserve another chance, she said in the central council chamber, her voice like broken glass. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't take one. We tried to run. We tried to hide. We even tried to understand. But maybe what's left isn't comprehension. Maybe it's action. Someone asked what kind of action. She stared at the display, the twin ships floating by Jupiter, unmoved, and said, "We go back." You could hear the room inhale. No one wanted to speak the obvious. Earth was dead. The ship was watching. The mirror didn't need permission to obliterate us. But she continued anyway. We send a crew. One ship. Small. Not to fight, not to negotiate, not to grovel. We go back to do something. Anything. Build something. Heal something. Save someone. Prove that the word try wasn't wasted on us. What if it kills us? I asked. She looked me dead in the eyes and replied, "Then it kills something that finally mattered." We called it the Ember Mission, like the last glow of a fire before it goes cold. 5 crew members were chosen. Specialists, not soldiers. People who had broken and rebuilt. Not because they were perfect, but because they had bled enough to understand what rebuilding costs. There was Commander Wren, Dr. Saeed El-Khoury, a cultural historian and former archivist from the Alexandria Orbital Library. Kara Mbeki, a biomechanic engineer who once terraformed the poisoned valleys of Europa's ice canyons. Tom Veers, a systems architect who helped design the Martian Harmony Net and also helped destroy it during the uprising. And me. I don't know why they picked me. Maybe because I kept asking the questions no one wanted to hear. Or maybe they needed someone who'd lost everything but was still too stubborn to shut up. We named the ship Tiller, like the handle of an old Earth boat, something used to steer. It was small, quiet, no weapons, no shields, just enough power to reach Earth, land, and act. Act on what? We didn't know, but we figured if we waited for certainty, we'd be waiting through extinction. The launch wasn't dramatic. No music, no ceremonies, just a sealed hatch and a silent release into Neptune's orbit. We were gone in seconds, the other stations watching like mourners at a grave. We traveled through dead space, no resistance, no interference. The mirror didn't block us. It let us come. That, more than anything, terrified me. As we passed Saturn, we saw the rings breaking, literally fracturing, not spinning, not floating, breaking, like glass cracking in slow motion. Saeed cried when he saw it. I don't blame him. Saturn's rings were ancient, sacred. Now they were a wound in the sky. We crossed Jupiter's gravity well in silence. The 2 ships, the Mirror and the perfected Us, remained as still as ever. We pinged no signal. They responded with none. The rest of the way was smooth. Disturbingly so. Until Earth came into view, there was no orbit. The planet's gravity still functioned, but the atmosphere was wrong. Pockets of turbulence spun like living creatures. Jet streams cut through clouds like blades. Lightning danced upward, not down. We expected to see fire, ash, a blackened sphere. But Earth wasn't destroyed. It was altered, rewritten. Continents were still where they belonged. The oceans still churned. But the land, it glowed, like veins of light had been etched through it, pulsing with something beneath the crust. Wren murmured, "It's alive." We weren't sure if she meant the planet, or something beneath it. We landed on the East African plateau. Coordinates traced to where the girl had broadcast her message. The land was warm. Not hot. Just warm. Like a body. No dust, no buildings, just fields and silence. We moved in formation, though it felt absurd. No one was here, no enemies, no predators, just wind and pulsing ground. We found the girl's bear first. Torn. Singed. But still there, laying beside a single red ribbon. Then we found the crater. It wasn't from an impact. It was grown, like the Earth had opened itself with surgical precision. Inside was a sphere, not tech, not stone, flesh, pulsing, moving. Wren stepped forward and said, This is it. Saeed knelt beside it. He placed a trembling hand on the surface. His face changed, went still. Then he turned to us and said, "It's asking." "What?" I asked. He swallowed hard. "It wants to know what we'll do with the truth." "Not the truth itself. Our choice." Rain looked at all of us. Her voice was soft now. "We build." We began that day. No instructions, no map. Just intuition. Rain and Kara started laying out foundations using scavenged parts from the tiller's cargo hold. I used polymer thread to etch pathways into the ground. Tom wired together a solar web from scratch. Saeed documented everything, even the sounds of the wind, like he was building memory from nothing. It wasn't about scale, it was about intention. We weren't rebuilding Earth. We were proving something, that when faced with nothing, we could still choose to create. That night, the sphere bloomed. It opened like a flower, revealing inside not machines or weapons, but a memory, projected in light, sound, scent. A memory of Earth before the smog, before the blood, before the walls and wires and poison, green, sky, laughter. The little girl was there, smiling, sitting beside a woman, her mother, holding a ribbon. That's when Ren collapsed. She recognized the woman. It was her. That girl had been Ren's granddaughter. The broadcast hadn't come from Earth's ruins. It had come from her family's last stand. That's why she'd said try, because she'd seen the mirror, and somehow it had seen her back. It had spared her memory. Given us one seed. To plant, to see if we could grow again. We stayed. Not because we had to, but because we finally understood. The mirror wasn't watching to judge anymore. It was watching to witness, to see what we'd do, not when we were powerful, but when we were broken, when we had no empire, no armies, just choice. Rien died 6 months later. We buried her beside the girl's ribbon. The grave was marked with one word. Tried. The sphere pulsed for 3 days after, and then the second ship, the perfect one, blinked out of existence, not destroyed, dismissed. The mirror had stopped comparing, and, for now, it was still watching. The first ship arrived 47 days after we landed. Not from the stars, but from orbit. We were finishing the east segment of the solar lattice, a half-dozen reflective plates meant to power irrigation nodes, when we saw the shadow cross the sky. A shuttle, small, scarred, burnt from radiation. Not ours, not Tiller. Cora was the first to spot it. Her eyes tracked the vessel silently as it descended in a slow, uneven spiral. Not graceful, not coordinated. Desperate. It crash-landed just north of our settlement, if you could even call it that. At that point, we were barely a network of solar webbing, hollow frame shelters, and nutrient pillars growing recycled protein moss. But it was ours. And now, someone else had come. We ran to the crash site with supplies, medkits, everything we had. Whatever fear we once had of outsiders had been buried under weeks of silence and soil. We weren't soldiers anymore. We were builders. The shuttle had torn into the crust, carving a trench of melted ground and uprooted glass-like soil. The heat shimmered off its broken hull, warping the air around it. 3 survivors crawled out. And they weren't like us. Their faces were gaunt, eyes hollow, their suits patched with strips of non-standard material. One of them had a severed arm, cauterized with a makeshift plasma torch. Another was barefoot, skin blackened from radiation burns. They looked at us like we were ghosts or gods. And then one of them fell to his knees and wept. Not in pain, but in relief. Their names were Danil, Vera, and Mercer. They had come from an old outer rim mining colony called Kepler Bastion, a place we thought had been abandoned years ago. Turns out they'd held on, just barely. The mirror hadn't destroyed them. It had ignored them. Left them in limbo, stuck in failing life domes, recycling air that couldn't be cleaned and eating fungus grown in rusted tanks. They'd seen the message. The child. And like us, they'd taken it as a sign. A challenge. So they came. Vera couldn't speak at first. She'd lost her tongue in a self-inflicted accident trying to purify water using radiation. Her left arm was gone from the elbow down, but her eyes, they never stopped moving. Watching. Absorbing. We brought them in, fed them, treated their wounds, let them rest. But we knew it couldn't stay simple, because we saw it in Danil's stare. He wasn't here just to build. He was calculating. It started with questions. What kind of energy output does the solar net give? How deep does the nutrient pillar reach? Have you tried modifying the pulse core for weapon applications? We answered honestly, thinking it was curiosity, until he said, "You know we could claim this entire zone, right? There's no jurisdiction left, no Earth Council, no Martian protectorate. You could lead the new age, reclaim this world." Ren would have slapped him for even suggesting it, but Ren was gone, and I wasn't sure I had her steal. Kara said nothing. She simply turned and walked away. Saeed muttered, "The disease is back." He was right. Even at the edge of extinction, when we had been shown the worst of ourselves, some still believed survival meant domination. The mirror hadn't needed to destroy us. We were doing it ourselves. Again. 2 days later, Daniel and Mercer began modifying the shuttle's fusion relay. "Just as backup," Daniel said. "In case the mirror changes its mind. You people are too passive." Passive. That was the word he used. As if restraint were cowardice. As if mercy were weakness. I pulled Kara aside that night. We spoke in hushed tones under the humming wind towers. "They're going to turn this place into a claim," she said, "like a stake in an old gold rush, and once others hear about it, they'll come," I finished. "Not to build. To own." We thought of banning Danil and his crew, forcing them off, but the land wouldn't allow it. The mirror had let them land. That meant it had allowed them. To reject them would be a contradiction. We were here to rebuild. Even if we had to rebuild beside the very sickness we once carried. Then came the second arrival. And this one wasn't human. At first, we thought it was the mirror ship, that it had moved. That judgment had returned. But it wasn't. It was Zorathian. A single vessel. Small. Scarred from battles far beyond this system. Its hull bore the marks of desperation, not conquest. It drifted in low orbit for 2 days before transmitting a signal. Translated, permission to land. We come unarmed. We didn't respond. Because we didn't need to. The mirror had heard. And it allowed them. When they landed, even Danil shut up. The Zorathians had changed. The proud, violent empire that once threatened Seoul was gone. These were survivors. One bore a breathing mask fused into its jaw. Another limped on mechanical limbs crudely bolted into bone. Their leader was a female of indeterminate age, her armor stripped of all rank, carrying a small, dying animal in her arms. "We were shown the reflection," she said in fluent Earth Standard. "And we ran." But the stars became hollow. I asked her what that meant. She just looked up at the sky, her reptilian eyes reflecting the clouds like mirrors. We understood too late. Glory is an illusion, power a wound. Now we seek only a place to heal. I believed her. Even Kara believed her. Danil didn't. That night he pulled me aside and hissed, "You're going to let them live here? Aliens? After what they did to Mars? You think they care about your crops and little solar webs?" "They're not the same," I said. He laughed. "Neither are we." And that was the most terrifying part. He was right. The mission had started with 5 people, then 8, now over 30. Not all of them carried the same light. The mirror had said, try. It had not said how. It had not said together. It had not said peace. The next day, Vera disappeared. We searched for hours. Drones, scanners, even the Zorathians helped. Nothing. Until Tom found the ribbon. Not the girl's, Vera's, tied to the solar net hub. Above it, burned into the metal plating, was a word none of us recognized. Saeed translated it later. Zorathian dialect, old, sacred. It meant chosen. Vera had been taken. But not by force. She had been selected, accepted, or perhaps absorbed. The mirror was still watching, still listening, still evaluating. Daniel made his move that night. He and Mercer stormed the solar net, claiming they were securing vital infrastructure. They disabled 2 lattice nodes and welded improvised weapons to the nutrient pillars. "We're not playing farmer anymore," Daniel shouted across the plaza. "This is a new world, and someone has to lead it before it falls apart again." No one moved to stop him, not even us, until the Zorathian leader stepped forward. She didn't raise a weapon. She simply said, "You fail again." Danil laughed. "Go back to your crater, lizard. We're done pretending." He aimed a pulse driver at her chest. That's when the ground cracked. Not an earthquake, not tectonic. The planet rejected him. The ground beneath Danil split open like a mouth. He didn't even scream. He just vanished, swallowed by the earth. Mercer dropped his weapon and ran into the wastes. No one followed. We stood in silence. Saeed whispered, "It's not here to stop us." Kara nodded. "It's here to respond." The mirror didn't judge with fire. It judged with consequence. Every action we took, it echoed, matched, reflected, even now, even still. That night the wind changed, softer, warmer. The soil shimmered faintly beneath our feet, as if something beneath the surface had finally accepted us. Not for our strength, not for our knowledge, but for our choices. We were trying, and the mirror was watching. It started with signals, shortwave bursts, analog distress tones, even Morse code. At first they were so faint we thought they were echoes in the static. But then they grew stronger. Ships were coming, from all directions, freighters, civilian transports, lifeboats with patched hulls and scavenged cores. Some limped into orbit on fumes and fire. Others coasted on inertia, their engines long dead. But one thing was clear. Humanity was still alive, and it was coming home. The mirror didn't stop them, which meant only one thing. It wanted to see what we would do next. We did what we knew how to do. We welcomed them. Over the next 16 days, more than 83 vessels arrived. Most carried no more than a dozen souls. Some were packed beyond design. Desperate people, sick, starving, scared. Many had no idea Earth was even still there, let alone that anyone had returned. They'd followed rumors, static bursts of the word try, and a dream of the girl with the ribbon. The Tiller settlement, once a fragile web of solar panels and nutrient towers, became a camp, then a colony, then a city. We had to expand quickly. Kara led the infrastructure build. Saeed drafted a communal charter. Tom handled digital stabilization to integrate the arriving tech. I helped with mediation, sorting disputes, guiding groups, soothing panic. But it wasn't long before the cracks started showing. People didn't arrive as blank slates. They came with beliefs, fears, baggage, and more dangerously, ideas. The first faction formed by Day 20. They called themselves the Keepers. Their founder, an ex-diplomat named Layla Rune, was soft-spoken, graceful, and absolutely certain. She believed the mirror was not an entity, but a test designed by something higher, a divine mechanism, an angelic force. She began preaching daily at dawn, reciting verses from a holy book she claimed had been rewritten the moment she stepped back on Earth. "We were cast into the stars not as punishment," she said to her gathering beneath the wind towers, "but as refinement. We are gold in the fire. Now the fire waits to see what we become." People listened. She offered certainty, order, redemption through faith, and after what we'd all seen, faith was tempting. Then came the second group. The architects, pragmatists, engineers, ex-military. They didn't care about divine judgment. They saw Earth's rebirth as an opportunity, a fresh start, a reset. Under their leadership, things could be better, more efficient. They argued for strong borders, centralized command, a curated population policy. "Hope without control is chaos," their spokesman said, "and chaos is how we fell the first time." They weren't villains, not at first. They helped build. They reinforced the solar lattice, deployed drones, mapped the terrain. But their vision? It didn't include everyone, especially not the Zorathians, or the sick, or the mentally unstable. They wanted Earth pure, curated, perfected, like the ship the mirror had once shown us, a future without weakness, and that scared me more than Daniel ever did. By day 40, 5 new factions had emerged: the Keepers, the Architects, the Flameborn, an extremist offshoot of the Keepers who believed only through pain and sacrifice could humanity be reborn, the Freegrounds, scavengers, runners, loosely organized into mobile bands who refused any governance, and us, the Ember Corps, as people started calling us, the originals, the builders. We didn't name ourselves. We didn't want to. But now we were a symbol. Proof that trying was possible, that peace, however fragile, could exist. And with every new arrival, the balance shifted. Tensions rose. People began choosing sides, even among our own. Saeed, once calm and measured, began leaning toward the Keepers. "They see the spiritual weight of this," he told me one night by the nutrient field. "We've been shown a reflection of our sins. This is not just rebuilding, it's repentance." "But they're building altars," I said, "not homes." He didn't answer. Kara had started working more with the architects. Not ideologically, but practically. Their efficiency appealed to her. Their designs were sleek, fast, reliable. But I saw the look in her eyes when they talked about screening the new arrivals. She didn't agree, but she didn't argue either, not yet. The tipping point came on day 62. A shuttle arrived carrying survivors from Callisto's northern arc. Among them was a woman named Mila Yen, brilliant, charismatic, ruthless. She had once been a governor of an independent research colony. Now she claimed to lead the conquered, a self-declared government of post-Earth humanity. They'd heard the signal, seen the judgment, and in her words, "We survived the mirror's gaze. Now we must shape the reflection it sees." Her plan? A planetary charter, with her at the center. She proposed a council composed of selected leaders from each recognized faction. 5 votes, 1 law, structured immigration, defense protocols, order. On the surface, it was reasonable, necessary even, but I felt it in my bones. This wasn't peace. It was consolidation. She wanted Earth not as a home, but a throne. The vote was scheduled for day 70, not for the charter, for the mirror's answer. You see, the Keepers had built something, a shrine. Not a religious one, not entirely. It was more like a transmitter. They believed the mirror still listened, still responded. So they composed a message. And they wanted every faction to vote whether or not to send it. I remember the message clearly. "We see now, we suffer not as punishment but as reminder. We have returned not in conquest but in contrition. We offer our will, our blood, our breath. Judge us again." It wasn't wrong, but it felt hollow, like we were asking to be erased with prettier words. The keepers said it was humility. The architects said it was weakness. The conquered said it was unnecessary. They had moved beyond messages. And we, the Ember Corps, we abstained, because we believed it wasn't about what we said anymore. It was what we did. The vote passed, 3-1. Message sent, no reply. Not right away. But that night, the sky changed again. The stars spun. Not visibly, but subtly, like someone had reached into the fabric of space and adjusted the lens. And then the mirror ship moved, only an inch, maybe less. But it moved. And suddenly everyone realized the test wasn't over. The judgment had not ended. It had only been paused, waiting. For what? No one knew. But now the factions weren't just arguing, they were preparing. We called an emergency assembly. For the first time, all faction leaders sat at the same table. Keepers, architects, conquered, flameborn, free grounds, and us. I remember what I said. I didn't plan it. It just spilled out. We are building again. That's good. But we are also dividing again. That's familiar. The mirror didn't judge our weakness. It judged our choices. So the question is, when we're faced with fear, will we choose unity or comfort? Will we try together? Silence followed. Then Layla Rune stood. She smiled and walked out. Then the architects followed. The conquered stayed longest, but eventually even Mila Yen rose. You speak with heart, she said, but not with power, and power will shape what comes next. She left. Only the Ember Corps remained, and the Zarathians. That night, the mirror ship spoke, not in voice, not in light, but in vision. Each of us, every human who had landed, every Zarathian, even the free grounds, dreamed the same dream. A tree, so tall it scraped the stars, its roots stretched across Earth, but its branches were on fire. Above it, a mirror hovered, not reflecting the world, but what could be. And a voice, distant and soft, whispered, the choice was never survival. It was what survives with you. We woke with our hearts pounding, because we finally understood. The mirror hadn't come to see if we could live. It came to see if we could change. And now? It was watching not just our choices, but our consequences. The first to vanish was Mila Yen. One moment she was addressing her followers in the Concord's new dome complex, preaching about governance, legacy, survival through structure. The next moment, she was gone. No light, no scream, no glitch in the feed. One blink, and she'd been erased from existence. Her people panicked, searched the entire compound, even tried using old echo field scanners in case it was some kind of stealth weapon. Nothing. No traces of heat, no biochemical residue, no blood. It was as if the universe had unspoken her. That same night, the mirror ship moved again. Not fast, not aggressive, but deliberately. Closer. Its shadow reached the upper edge of Earth's stratosphere. Still silent. Still watching. But now, acting. By morning, panic had set in. The Concord issued an emergency security order invoking martial law across their controlled sectors. Checkpoints were established. Movement was restricted. Surveillance drones buzzed overhead like hornets. The architects backed the move, claimed it was necessary for containment and order. The keepers disagreed, but they didn't protest. The Flameborn, however, saw opportunity. They declared Myla's disappearance divine intervention, a judgment, not against the many, but the ambitious. They began burning shrines to leadership, symbols of governance, even tools of structure. "Burn the thrones," they chanted. "Leave no kings for the mirror to break." Saeed and I stood on a ridge, watching their fires twist toward the sky. Smoke coiled into the clouds like a signal to a sleeping god. "They think this is the apocalypse," I said. He didn't reply, just stared at the fires. I glanced at him. You believe them? No, he murmured. But I believe something ancient is watching to see how close we'll come. Then the dreams changed, the shared ones. It began 2 days after Mila's vanishing. First Kara, then Thomas, then 2 Zarathians, then me. We started dreaming of ourselves. Not metaphor, not symbols, literal perfect versions of our lives. Only they weren't our memories. They were alternates, lives we could have lived. I saw myself as a diplomat, guiding peace across fractured colonies. I saw another version where I stayed on Earth, married, with a daughter who had my eyes. Saeed dreamed he'd finished the Alexandria rebuild, saving billions of lost records. Kara saw a future where she'd cured planetary soil rot on Ganymede, saving a food crisis. Each dream ended the same way. A mirror. And behind it, a version of us, reaching out, but never quite touching. Some couldn't handle it. 3 members of the Free Grounds walked into the ocean and never returned. A keeper named Yarrow went blind, by choice, scratching out his own eyes and whispering, "If we see too much, we stop being." Even the Zarathians were shaken. Their leader, Kavana, confessed during a joint circle. It is not guilt. It is grief. Grief for what we now know we could have been. And that's when the mirror finally spoke. Openly, clearly, to all of us, at once. There was no transmission, no broadcast, no signal, just presence. It fell like gravity, pulled into the back of our minds, and a voice, so vast it didn't echo in the air, but inside our memories, spoke a single phrase. Begin the unveiling. That's what it called it, the unveiling. And then the truths began. The first truth was the Concord archive. Encrypted, private, invisible to everyone but mirror-aligned tech. And yet, overnight, it displayed itself on every screen across the settlement. Every lie, every manipulation, every secret deal, every resource hoarding, every quiet purge they'd prepared for population control. Names, dates, locations, even planned eliminations. People rioted. The Concord collapsed in 4 hours. Its leadership either fled or surrendered themselves, not from force, but from truth. The mirror hadn't fired a weapon. It had just shown us who we were. And that was enough. The second truth came 2 days later. This one hit the architects. It was a hologram, projected not by us, but by the soil itself. The wind towers flickered with it. A child, no older than 10, stood in perfect detail, pointing at the towers. Then she spoke. "These aren't efficient. They can't sustain what's coming. You designed for control, not life." A cascade of data followed. Design schematics, energy loss projections, flaws, solutions. The mirror didn't destroy the system. It simply corrected it. The architect's pride shattered. Some refused to believe it. Others broke down in tears. Kara was silent through it all. Then she rolled up her sleeves and said, "Then let's build it right." And for the first time, the towers began humming with resonance. Not energy, but harmony. The third truth was the hardest, because it wasn't projected. It was personal. It found us in our sleep, our solitude, our silence. Every person on Earth experienced it differently. For some it was a whisper, for others a flood. But the content was always the same, a memory, one we'd tried to bury. Mine was of Berlin. My brother. The last time we spoke before the blackout. I told him I'd protect him. Then I boarded my transport and never looked back. I'd told myself he was gone before I left. But the mirror showed me differently. Showed me him watching my ship leave. Showed me him whispering my name as the sky cracked open. I collapsed after that. Didn't speak for a day. Just lay in the nutrient garden, listening to the wind that now carried strange melodic tones. Not words, but comfort, sorrow, recognition. I think the mirror was trying to say, "We see you. Even in your darkest, even in your shame, you are still seen." By week 2 of the unveiling, something began changing in the air. Literally. The atmosphere stabilized. Winds moved in predictable flows. The planet began correcting itself. Not through us, through reaction to us. Every act of creation, of healing, of reconciliation, however small, was echoed by the world. The soil grew richer. The sun's rays shifted frequency, reducing radiation. Animals, real ones, began to emerge from the depths. Earth was responding. It was healing, with us or because of us. We didn't know. We just kept trying. But not all truths were shared willingly. Some resisted. A group of Flameborn stormed a keeper sanctuary, accusing them of betrayal, saying their rituals had provoked the mirror's judgment. It escalated into violence. 2 died. The mirror responded within minutes. The flames they carried turned on them. Their weapons overheated. Their tents caught fire without heat. No one was hurt after that, but a single word appeared in the ash. Consequences. No preaching, no warning, just reflection. Always reflection. We finally understood the mirror's method. It wasn't about control, it was about choice and consequence, replayed not as punishment, but as proof of what we were and what we could be. Saeed left one morning. No fanfare, no goodbye, just a note carved into stone outside the garden. The mirror does not want worship, it wants honesty. So I go into the wilds, to see what truths I can still find in myself. I still miss him, but I understand. Some truths can't be seen in the crowd, only in solitude. As the sun set on day 100 since the Ember mission landed, we gathered. Not by order, not by ritual, just because. Over 200 humans, 17 Zorathians, and something else. The girl, the one from the ribbon. She stepped forward from the crowd. Not a dream, not a projection. A real child, alive, breathing, silent. She looked at us, smiled, and then pointed to the sky. The mirror ship had moved. It was leaving, slowly, rising. Its twin, the perfect us, remained, glowing faintly. We watched in silence. No music, no speeches, just the sound of wind, alive with melody. The girl turned back to us and whispered her second word. The girl said, "Begin." And just like that, the mirror left. No burst of light, no flash of propulsion. It simply drifted upward, silently folding itself into the velvet black of space like a thought disappearing from the mind. We stood in its wake like people at the end of a funeral, not grieving a death, but standing at the quiet edge of what used to be fear. The kind of fear that comes when you think someone is always watching, judging, measuring. And now that watcher was gone. Not because we had convinced it, not because we had defeated it, but because we had chosen something different, and it had believed us. Not believed our words, but our actions. And now we had to live, without the judgment. That was somehow scarier. The mirror had left behind only one thing. The second ship. The one shaped like our own technology, only perfected. It hovered quietly in low orbit, still and quiet, like a monument. Or a gift. No one dared approach it. It was like trying to touch the idea of what we could be. We didn't know what was inside. Some thought it held answers. Others feared it held a final test. So we let it remain. Floating. Watching without eyes. Silent without threat. Like a reminder. We called the new beginning Solstice 1. A name born from both history and hope. The longest night giving way to light. We built, but not to expand. We planted, but not to conquer. We explored, but not to claim. Kara led the expansion of the living sectors. Her new designs harmonized with the planet's rhythms. She said she could hear the soil now, and I believed her. Crops that hadn't grown in 100 years were sprouting from enriched earth. Trees regenerated across once dead plains, bending slightly toward solar arrays, like they were reaching out to thank us. Tom turned the old defense satellites into communication hubs. He said, "If we're going to make it, everyone should see the same sky." And so they did. A child born in the rebuilt Cairo Ark could speak to a scavenger girl in the ruins of Ontario. No codes, no ranks, just connection. The Zorathians worked alongside us, not as allies, but as fellow witnesses. They planted their own knowledge in the soil, medicine grown from crystal-shelled flora, healing light woven into banners that pulsed with song. Their language began to appear in murals, intertwined with ours, as if the planet itself were stitching cultures together through the act of memory. Even the keepers changed. Their prayers became stories. Their temples became libraries. They taught not commandments, but lessons. "Do not seek the mirror," their new scroll said. "Become it." The free grounds became bridges. They roamed, mapped, listened. And when they returned, they told tales of survivors across the planet, pockets of humanity slowly stirring awake, blinking into the new dawn like animals coming out of winter. And every time a new soul arrived, we didn't ask for their name first. We asked, "What will you build?" It became our greeting. And sometimes the answer was a song, sometimes a garden, sometimes a long, broken silence, followed by the first tears someone had shed in years. Everything was welcome. Everything began. As for me, I kept the girl's ribbon. She never spoke again, never aged. She wandered through the settlements like a quiet breeze. She smiled. She listened. And when she looked at you, it was like someone else was staring from inside her eyes, not watching, but remembering. Some believed she was the mirror. Others believed she was what the mirror had left behind, its final reflection. A child not born of blood, but of choice. I never tried to define her. I just followed her once. She led me to the northern edge of the lake, where the nutrient towers first stood. There, she pointed to a small, crooked tree, barely alive, leaning into the wind. I stared at it. And she whispered, "Try again." I didn't understand until I looked closer. It was the first tree we'd planted when we arrived, the one that never took root properly. We'd assumed it had died, but it hadn't. It had twisted, shifted, adapted. Its bark was cracked, its limbs thin, but its roots had held. It had survived. By changing. And then I understood. The mirror hadn't just shown us what we'd done, it had shown us what we could endure and still choose to try. A year passed, then another. We stopped counting days and started naming seasons. The rains that came with the east wind, the bloom time when the sky turned copper for 3 days, the long dusk when the sun slowed on the horizon, painting everything in gold. We told our children these names, and they told theirs. And somewhere along the way, we stopped being afraid, not because we forgot the judgment, but because we earned its absence. We lived as if watched, not in fear, but in pride. Like dancers on a stage where the audience had already left, but the show still mattered, because we finally danced for ourselves. Then one morning the perfect ship was gone. Not destroyed, not taken, just absent. Vanished from orbit, no trace, no echo, not a single soul saw it leave. But we didn't panic. We didn't fall apart, because this time we understood. It had waited, watched, measured, and finally, quietly, it had decided we were enough, not perfect, but enough to begin. I still wake sometimes with the dreams. Not warnings, not horrors, just possibilities. Me in another life, holding a child I never had, building a tower in a city that never fell, laughing with friends who never died. The dreams are soft now, kind. And I wake up smiling, because I no longer chase what could have been. I build with what is, with the living, with the trying, with the small, the broken, the hopeful. That is the human gift. Not to conquer, not to know all, but to try again, even after we should have been erased, even after the universe held up a mirror and found us wanting. We didn't look away. We didn't run. Not anymore. We reached back and built something. Even if it was just one tree, one garden, one child laughing in the wind. It was enough. It is enough. We were the species that should have died when the mirror came. But we did the one thing the galaxy hadn't expected. We reflected. And then we changed. Not completely, not perfectly, but with purpose. And when the mirror moved on, it left behind a world where the question was no longer, why are we the ones running, but instead, what will we build today?